Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us for this series of conversations with candidates to elected officers in elected offices in Montgomery County in Maryland. Today we have Brian Anleu, who's running for county council. Brian is a lifelong East County resident and career public servant. Brian happens to be the son of immigrant parents from Guatemala and El Salvador who came to the DC region in the 1960s and 70s. He grew up with his parents and his abuela in the Hillendale neighborhood of Silver Spring, where he graduated from Springbrook High School and the University of Maryland. Brian also began his career in public service as an aide in the Maryland General Assembly, followed by a stint as a healthcare navigator for the Obamacare implementation. As a healthcare navigator, he helped many Latino residents get enrolled in healthcare plans in both Montgomery County and Prince George's County. Most recently, Brian served as Chief of Staff to the Montgomery County Planning Board. He's running to deliver much needed resources and economic development to District 5. If elected, Brian would be the first council member of Central American descent and the youngest member of the council. So Brian, welcome. Thank you for being with us today. It's a pleasure. And again, to all of us who are online with us today, good afternoon. And Brian, this is all yours.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so I won't go over the bio again, but just to tell you all a little bit more about the district, given the new, district boundaries. District 5 is everything northeast of the Beltway, up the 29 corridor, all the way to the Howard County line, and then west over to Aspen Hill. So it includes the Burnt Mills, Four Corners, North Woodmore, the White Oak, Fairland, Burtonsville, Bricks, Cheney, Colesville, Cloverly, and Leisure World communities. So that's a little bit about the district and a little bit about me. I thought I'd go over a little bit of a presentation. I'm a data and numbers guy. I like to see different things, and so I'm sure you all have heard many stump speeches from candidates. But I think what sets me apart is that I really like to dive deeply into the trends and emerging issues in the county. So with that, I'll share my screen and share a little bit about the county and what's to come. So I apologize if you all have seen some of this information already, but I hope you all find it a little bit useful and informative. And then I'd love to answer any questions either about the presentation or about myself. So this is Montgomery County at a glance. This is some facts and figures that again you may or may not have seen. So the first is that Montgomery County's operating budget is roughly $6 billion. That's bigger than some of our states, North Dakota and Rhode Island in particular, and South Dakota and Delaware there. So that's a pretty big budget there. But as you could see, our top two expenditures in our budget are pretty much spoken for. 46.6% is dedicated to MCPS. That's partly required by state law and maintenance of effort. And then another 10.5% is public safety. It's police, it's firefighters, first responders, and those kinds of things. And then it's everything else, including a sizable chunk that's dedicated to debt service for bonds and paying off capital financing for all the infrastructure that we're building in the county. So why does that matter? Well, first, because we're projected to grow by about 200,000 people over the next 20 to 30 years. So we need to be able to grow as a county and continue to meet the needs of those residents. So you can see we're just at about a little over 1 million right now. We'll be at about 1.2 by 2040, and a little bit more by 2050. So where are those people coming from? Well, in part, they're coming from internationally. You can see here that there's a decline in domestic migration. This area, as you all know, is fairly expensive to live in. and particularly with telework, people are finding it easier to remote work from other places. But even before that, you all could see that over the last few years, there's been a decline in domestic migration to this area. And so what we're really seeing is the net migration kind of really contributing to a lot of that growth. And we in the planning department expect that those sort of trends to hold true over the next few decades. So in terms of international migration, here's where people are coming from. So it's a whopping 40% from Latin America, and another little over a third from Asia, and then other places. So these are the various countries of origin, of which El Salvador is number one, my mother's home country. So lots of people coming from there, and then Guatemala fifth. So where are we going to put all those people, and how are we going to be able to house all those people? That's one of the challenges that the county is currently facing. And this graph here is actually a little bit outdated. The actual number is actually closer to 4,000 now. So we need about 3,500 units to 4,000 units a year to be able to meet those population, to be able to house that increased population. And as you can see here on the left, we're nowhere near meeting that. In a good year, the last good year we had in 2014, we built over 3,500 units, but in more recent years, we've built less than 2,500, and in some years less than 2,000. So we're falling far short of our housing production goals. And we need to really ramp up our housing production of all types of housing, to be able to house all the people that are coming here from, like I said, internationally or domestically. This is a little bit about where people where in the county people are going, and where the county is growing. So these are the state legislative districts. But you can see here the orange dots are essentially more people. And so you can see that a lot of people are locating in our urban areas, downtown Silver Spring, Bethesda, along the DC border, somewhat along the 29 corridor, but then also along the 270 corridor. That area has seen a lot of growth, with growth in the Up County and development in the Up County in particular. Here's how population is projected to grow. So again, sort of keeps in line with that same pattern. That big white sort of wedge that you see on the outskirts of the county, it's kind of like a horseshoe. That's mostly the agricultural reserve. We're not projecting a lot of growth there because the county simply doesn't want growth to go there. We want to concentrate growth along our transportation corridors, and other more urban, more dense areas. So here's a little bit about, again, sort of touching on how the demographics have changed over time. In the 1990s, you could see here that most of the county was predominantly white, or white majority, with the exception of a few areas around Silver Spring and White Oak, where there was no predominant group. Fast forward to 2020, and the county looks very different, as I'm sure you all can appreciate. There's no predominant group in large swaths of the county, both along the 270 corridor in Up County, and also East County and Mid County. And then you have pockets of Black predominance and Black majority in the East County, and Hispanic majority in the Tacoma-Langley area, the Wheaton area, and then pockets of Gaithersburg and Up County. And then the one Asian majority census tract there on the west side of 270, I guess near I think it's Potomac, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe North Potomac. So just to summarize about the demographic changes, our over 65 population is increasing. Our under 5 population is falling as our birth rates. People are deciding to have children later in life, or forego having children at all. We're increasing our diversity, but geographical segregation is a real thing, particularly along racial lines. income and race are correlated and share a geographic pattern. So lower income people of the same ethnic group or background are clustering in certain parts of the county. And our population is mostly concentrated along the north-south corridors in southeastern parts of the county and 270. So what are we going to do about all this? Again, just going back to, how are we going to grow as a county and where are we going to put people in the county? So this is a map that shows all the different zoning types in the county. So the council is really responsible for zoning, land use, and those kinds of issues. So you can see here that a big chunk of the county is single family only. Then we have agricultural, of course. We have parks and open space, and then a very, very small percentage of land. You can't even really see it on the map, but it's this orange color is multifamily. Less than 3% of our county is zoned for multifamily properties. At the same time, home ownership is declining in the county, particularly for people under age 35. It used to be that you could buy a modest-sized home in the county, or maybe an entry-level home in the county on a modest income, a middle income, and that's quickly not becoming the case. I mean, you could see here in the 90s, people under 35, 46% could purchase a home in the county. That's now down to 28%. That's a stark, it's steep decline. A lot of that has to do with home ownership affordability. Home values have quickly outpaced household incomes, and this is also a little bit outdated in that the gap, particularly that we've seen over the past 2 years with the pandemic, has only made this wider as properties have been bid up, and you've seen properties really sell for high amounts over list. So just keep that in mind. At the same time, single family homes are getting larger. And so what you're seeing is developers building homes that are no longer what you might consider modest. In the 1950s, the average single family home was about 1,500 square feet. That's more than doubled. It's now the average single family home that's getting built in the county is 3,700 square feet. That's huge. And part of the reason for that is that if developers can only build single family homes, they're going to maximize their profit by building the largest home possible. So that's partly what's contributing to this increase in larger single family homes. At the same time, rental units are getting smaller. So there's fewer rental units for families, fewer 3-bedroom units, fewer 2-bedroom units, and you're seeing an increase in studios and 1-bedroom units over previous decades. So a lot of families are getting squeezed out of the county. And lastly, despite homes getting larger, you're also seeing more people living alone. People deciding for one reason or another not to cohabitate, either because their children have gotten older and moved away. Maybe they've divorced or lost a spouse. But people just deciding that they want to live alone. So there's plenty of extra space in our existing housing stock for different people and different families, but you're not necessarily seeing that reflected in the market. Just to touch on a little bit on the environment and transportation aspect of housing and land use policy, building dense urban developments, as you can see here in this map, reduces driving and increases pedestrian and bicyclist and transit access, transit use almost as much as transit access, proximity to transit. So essentially what this is saying is that the more dense or more urban an area, the more likely people are to use other forms of transportation, even if they're not in close proximity to, say, a metro station, for example. And on the environmental piece of why urban development and sustainable growth is important, I think this is a very important, clear example that a lot of people don't think about. Some of you might remember Pike and Rose before it was Pike and Rose. It was just a giant sea of gray parking and asphalt. And now you can see today it's a lot of green roofs, tall buildings, street trees, and stormwater features, bioretention cells, and those kinds of things. And so what you can actually see here is that by shifting from old sprawly developments like what existed at there, like commercial strip centers, to what exists today at Pike and Rose, you're able to reduce the stormwater runoff and contribute to the health of our bay and our environment tremendously. But that's not enough. We need to do more. And that means, as I said before, in our single family areas and single family zones, allowing denser types of development, like you see here. These all may look like modest single family homes, but here's a secret: they're not. The image on the left, I believe, is a quadplex. It's actually 4 units. The 2 on the right are duplexes. So they are essentially multifamily units that look no different than a lot of single family houses that you might find in other parts of the county. And here's just an example of what is currently allowed and what is not. So you could build the house on the left, just modest single family home with a 2-car garage. You could build that in most parts of the county, particularly anywhere that's zoned for single family, roughly 37% of the county. But what you can't build is a similarly sized, similarly looking duplex like the one you see on the right. And the only difference is that on the right, it has a second set of doors and it's a totally separate unit. So this is the fight that the county is currently having over Thrive 2050, which many of you may have heard about. And these are important issues I would submit to you all, because again, housing affordability and our ability to retain and attract workers for your businesses really depends on affordability throughout the county. So this is just kind of a conversation starter, topic. Again, my background is in land use and housing policy and transportation in particular. But during my time in public service, I've worked on all sorts of issues, particularly issues related to the business community, such as tax credits and other incentives for businesses. I've worked on environmental policy, but really, I think this here is probably the most salient issue right now facing our county, facing our business community, and something that everyone should be thinking about. So that is pretty much the bulk of my presentation. I hope I didn't go through that too fast. But if you all have any questions, I'd love to answer any questions. Otherwise, I can continue talking about myself.
Either way is fine. I think the presentation was great. And I have to tell you, it's probably the first time we see the problem of housing explaining in such a way with numbers, statistics, and the main problems when it comes to the permits and what's allowed and what's not allowed in the county. We definitely have a shortage. It's a problem. It's a basic problem of not having enough units. So Brian, tell us, what would you do if you're elected as council member? What is the first step for us to get Montgomery County out of the problem, which we are in terms of housing?
Yeah, so the first thing is sort of as I highlighted, which is liberalizing our zoning code to allow more multifamily housing, more multifamily types of housing in other parts of the county where it's currently not allowed. The second thing, really second and third thing, is modernizing our building code. And, now we're really getting into sort of the weeds of the issue. But, we really need to modernize our building code. It used to be, believe it or not, that you could order a house out of a Sears catalog. For those of you that remember catalogs, right? You could order a prefab house and have it delivered and installed They were mostly single story houses, and they were plopped down on a foundation. And prefab housing, the advantage that it has over housing that's constructed on site is that it's typically cheaper to mass produce and ship housing somewhere than it is to build it, to spec on site. So you really don't have a lot of that happening anymore. And some of these houses, believe it or not, still exist. They're not poor quality like some people might think they are. They're not trailer homes, if you will. They're quality built housing. And so we need to allow and incentivize and encourage more prefab housing. I read a piece recently that I think in Minneapolis, which is ahead of us in terms of liberalizing in the building code and zoning code, developers have been able to save 40% of the cost of construction just by building modular housing off-site. So 40%. Those are real. I don't want to say savings, because the person who's purchasing that house they're not really saving, but it opens it up to more people along the income spectrum. So that's sort of the first thing is allowing more prefab housing. The second thing is, if you want to build a building in Montgomery County that is taller than 4 stories currently, you have to build it out of concrete and steel. And concrete and steel is incredibly expensive. Whereas a building that's 4 stories or shorter, you can build out of wood stick construction, wood frame construction. And so there are new products out there. Europe is really leading the way in this in terms of mass timber production. It's treated wood that is just as durable and is just as strong as steel, that would allow the building to be built above 4 stories. And again, would bring down the cost of that construction. So a lot of what I'm talking about is catching up to the times and catching up to new technologies, new products, new things that are on the market, to diversify, if you will, our housing supply. So I'd say that's the first thing. We're always going to have a shortage of truly affordable housing for our lowest income levels. Because Montgomery County is an attractive and great place to live. And that's a matter of resources. That's a matter of adding money to the Housing Initiative Fund. That's a matter of financing projects through pilots, payments in lieu of taxes, or tax increment financing programs that make it easier to build projects. But the point is, it's both. You have to do both. You have to both add resources and you have to make it easier to build here in the county. So that's how I'd really tackle the issue of housing affordability and construction.
Interesting. Some of that rezoning and building taller buildings, those initiatives have been rejected in the past by the very same communities where we want to build these houses, particularly Silver Spring and other places where redevelopments of parts of the neighborhood into townhouses, or maybe going into buildings that are probably, steel and concrete, but there are 7 stories tall, 8 stories tall, have been fought against by the community. They're against this densification. They think it breaks the communities. It changes dramatically the landscape. It even affects the landscaping and all the environmental resources around these communities. Do you see these redevelopments as a problem, as the communities have highlighted?
I think the simple answer is no. And again, the point of showing that last slide that showed the two, what is allowed currently and what's not allowed currently, is that a lot of times when people think about multifamily housing, they think something that is drastically different than what exists in their neighborhood today. And it doesn't have to be. What I'm trying to tell and explain to people is that it doesn't have to be. There are lots of ways to make these housing types compatible with existing character of the neighborhood. And I say character with air quotes, right? Because a lot of times when people talk about the character of the neighborhood, they're not talking about the size and massing of the of the units or the buildings themselves. What they're often talking about is the type of people that will live in those units. And it may not even be racial. It may not even be socioeconomic, well, rather, it may not even be a racial issue. It may be a socioeconomic issue, right? What they're saying is that, they bought their home for $500,000 or $1 million. They could afford to live there. They scraped together to afford to live there. Why should someone else who's not on the same economic rung on the economic ladder as them be able to do the same thing? And so again, that may not be racial, but when you hear the terms character of the neighborhood, that's what they're talking about. To the environmental issues, as I said, I think the point of the Pike and Rose slide is that you can build dense urban development and still meet our environmental goals. And in fact, building dense urban development near transit is one of the best things that we can do for our planet, because it reduces driving, it reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and the buildings themselves are typically more environmentally friendly than one might exist there prior. So the short answer is, I don't buy those arguments. It is a tough sell. I'll be honest. It is a tough sell to people, and it's a hard sell. But the one thing I would say is that people are coming to this county, whether we want it or not. We're going to continue growing, and we have to continue growing. We cannot stagnate. If our economy stagnates, that's income taxes that we're not adding to the county's funds. That's growth that is not happening. Those are jobs that are not going to be here. And so our ability to attract the workforce of tomorrow depends on our ability to grow. I know it can be a tough pill to swallow in some places, but again, I think that there are a lot of things that the county can do to mitigate the impacts of those types of developments.
So tied to the problem of housing is the problem of transportation. How do you see the expansion of the I-270 corridor up to Germantown?
Yeah, so I think you're talking about the Managed Lanes project.
Yes, the I-270 expansion.
Yeah. So I'm not a big roads guy. I'll be honest. Roads typically result in more traffic congestion, because of this thing called induced demand. Essentially, when you build more roads, more people drive. There are, of course, ways to mitigate that, by including transit on the roads, for example. And I know that transit is supposed to be a component of the 270 495 plan. And there's also a portion of that is going to dedicate revenues from those tolls to transportation improvements along 270 and potentially 495. Ultimately, the county does play a role in that project, but it's a state project. And if the county, if the state decides to move forward with it, I think my role as a council member would be to push for and champion first that the project is mitigating the stormwater impacts and environmental impacts from that project, from adding the actual lanes. And then secondly, that, no cultural and historical resources are impacted. There's cemeteries and parkland along that corridor that would be impacted. And so either relocating those places or getting money from the state to build more parks and things other ways. But in terms of what we could do about the traffic itself, the council actually just passed yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, the I-270 corridor forward plan, which essentially calls for a few things. The first is it calls for long-term improvements to commuter rail along the Brunswick line to allow two-way commuter trains on the MARC line. So that would be the first thing. And then the second thing is a red line extension from, I guess it'd be Shady Grove to Germantown. And then in the short term, it calls for using some of that toll revenue to fund what's called the Corridor Cities Transitway, which is essentially a bus rapid transit system that connects the Up-County to the Wheaton Mid-County area. So, again, I think the best way that we can get people out of their cars reduce traffic congestion is to make it safer and easier and more convenient for them to use other modes of transportation, whether it's walking, biking, or using transit. And so I think if we make some of these commitments and improvements, it'll make it easier for folks. But again, that's a long-term project, and we'll see. There's a gubernatorial election this year, so we'll see who wins that race and what that the next governor decides to do with that project. But ultimately, I see my role on the council as a champion for mitigating the impacts of that project, and then finding other ways to lessen the impacts. Because the reality is that if there are toll lanes, we've seen in Virginia, some of those tolls have gone up, really, really high, where, the average person, may not be able to afford to use those toll lanes, whereas they may be able to afford to use a bus or some other mode of transportation that the county provides.
Interesting. So let's talk about District 5, your district, East County. How do you see the housing problem? How do you see the infrastructure problems in that particular section of the county, in that particular district? What are your initiatives for District 5?
Yeah, so, that's it's one of the great things about running in District 5 is that I think District 5, unlike other parts of the county, is ready for growth and ready for development. The reality is that District 5 has been starved of a lot of growth and development for a long time. We haven't had any multifamily construction in District 5 in 30 years. The last multifamily building was built the year I was born, in the White Oak area. Mm-hmm. And so what you've seen is a lot of investment, not just private investment, but public investment go up the 270 corridor. And you see a lot of that in the Up County, and that's great for that part of the county. But what you're not seeing is that same level of investment here in the East County, particularly with our proximity to FDA and the federal government. And so that's sort of an area that we could leverage to create a bioscience development campus, priority health development campus. Particularly in the Viva White Oak area. And people here in this area want to see that happen. They want to see jobs. I've lived here my entire life. And, when people in this area want to go out to get a nice meal or they want to do some shopping, they have to go up to Howard County. They have to go to Laurel in Prince George's County. They have to go to downtown Silver Spring. They have to go to Rockville or elsewhere just to do basic things that you could do in other parts of the county. And so people are really, ready for that type of growth and development that I'm talking about. And so what it's going to mean for the East County is a lot of those infrastructure improvements that we're talking about. It's expanding the existing bus rapid transit service on 29. It's looking at bus rapid transit service on New Hampshire, connecting down to the Tacoma Langley area and the eventual Purple Line. And then it's investing in other infrastructures to make some of that development happen, unlock some of that development potential for some of these areas. In Burtonsville, where I lived for about 10 years, we have a mostly vacant shopping center. It's one of the few parts of the county where you'll find a shopping center that's 99% vacant. There's maybe one or two storefronts. And so the county can really leverage its property, the park and ride that it has next to it, to unlock some of that redevelopment potential for that property. And that's one where, if you tore that shopping center down today and you added a 10-story building there, you might get some complaints from a few people, but overwhelmingly, I think people would clap and welcome that development because a 10-story building with people living there is better than, empty strip center where people are doing burnouts.
So how do you attract more jobs? Because that's a big problem in District 5. No jobs in District 5, no good jobs other than some retail.
Yeah. So again, it starts with creating those activity centers, right? So when Viva White Oak is complete or underway, there's going to be office and lab space and those kinds of things. So part of that is unlocking that development potential for that. There's also an interesting idea right now that's being studied and is in the works to bring Montgomery College, bring a fourth campus of Montgomery College to East County, either to White Oak or to the Burtonsville area. That's something that could both help educate the area, but also provide a talent and workforce pipeline for businesses that want to be there. I recently met with a business owner that she just happened to own a house in Burtonsville and decided to start a facility logistics planning and development biotech company that works with companies like United Therapeutics and Novavax and other companies like that to do their logistics, supply chain management, and lab space development. And she opened her business in Burtonsville of all places, her office in Burtonsville of all places. And in hindsight, she realized that probably wasn't the best location because there's really nothing there. Her employees don't want to come to the office. In part, most people want to work from home these days, but when people do want to come to the office, they want to come to vibrant spaces where they can, go to happy hour after work or, go shopping after work or do something like that. So part of it is creating the activity centers that don't exist currently. There, it's providing the space that doesn't exist currently. And then part of it is, is creating the incentives. So, right now, Burtonsville actually is one of the cheapest and best places to start a business in Montgomery County. You would get all sorts of tax incentives from starting business there, from a break on personal property taxes to a break on the actual fit out of the space, the office space. And so part of it is creating the space for people to or businesses to exist. And part of it is creating the incentives for businesses to want to locate there.
The area is also lacking security. There's a lot of issues with burglaries and safety in general. This is not particular to District 5. It's happening and it's increasing in Montgomery County in all areas. But District 5 has suffered from these problems for a long time now. How do you plan to work with the police, law enforcement, to make District 5 safer for everybody?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in addition to the land use and housing policy background, I staffed Councilmember Tom Hucker for 5 years on the Public Safety Committee, where I worked a lot on these issues. And I agree. We're seeing, spikes in crime all over the county. Not just, the current District 5 in downtown Silver Spring, but, it's something that isn't unique to the pandemic. Some people might say, oh, well, it's the pandemic. The pandemic has caused a lot of this increase in crime. And the reality is that we've had issues with crime hotspots in the East County for, a long time, long before the pandemic. And we, will likely continue to have them after the pandemic. Because of some of these challenges with, access to jobs, with, all sorts of other issues that you're seeing in the community. And so I think that, the first thing is rebuilding that trust between the community and the police department, making it, easier for people to communicate with officers when they see something instead of, living in fear. And that, that partly has to do with making sure that officers are visible, believe it or not. I mean, if officers are out in the community interacting with people and people are more likely to confide in them. But, unfortunately, because of, the social justice movement and trends that we've seen, officers, I think, have been hesitant to engage with the public, if you will. And that's really made it challenging to rebuild that trust. So that's part of it. I think the other part is that we have a lot of vacancies in the police department. We, this has been an issue in District 5 for a long time. Well, the third police district, it's been an issue for a long time. And it's been exacerbated by, what I'm talking about, the trend, away from policing. And so what we need to do is we need to, in part, raise officer, starting salaries to make it more competitive with other jurisdictions in the region. We need to offer other incentives to make off, recruit the best officers. And then, make sure that when we do that, that those officers in the community engaging with people, and being proactive. I know that other, people in public office have, different opinions, and that, I certainly agree that police aren't always the answer. And sometimes we need mental health workers and social workers to address certain issues, particularly, if someone is having a mental health crisis. But it's not an either or proposition. I think we can tackle both at the same time.
How do we improve education, elementary, middle, and high schools in District 5? What are the main challenges, in your opinion?
Yeah, there's a number of challenges. I'd say, and before I'll preface it with the fact that the council, does not set education policy. That's really the Board of Education, and so the council can really deliver the resources, as I showed there on that first graph, to make sure that the schools are well funded, and have the resources they need to create the programs and initiatives to teach our students. But again, the council doesn't set education policy. In terms of what the council can do, the council, school facility conditions are an issue all over District 5 and all over the county. There's a lot of overcrowding. There's a lot of schools with other building needs, such as HVAC systems that don't work. So it's too hot in the summer and it's too cold in the winter. That's really distracting for our students. There's schools like Burtonsville Elementary and Greencastle Elementary, where my children went, where the cafeterias are too small. And so you're having 5 and 6 lunch periods, starting as early as, 9:30 a.m. and ending as late as 2 p.m., and that has an impact on our children too. I mean, if you eat breakfast at 8:30 and then you got to go eat lunch at 10 o'clock, one, the student might not even be hungry, but 2, they're going to get hungry later on in the day. And same thing where, if you eat breakfast at 8:30 and your lunch is until 1:30, that's difficult for some of our, particularly our younger children. So those are some of the issues that the county, that the council can address, because it's around our capital budget and our capital needs. But for the most part, it's about making sure that, the schools are funded, that the money is being spent wisely. The other thing I've been interested in, and I worked on when I was in Councilmember Hucker's office, is around mental health. A lot of our students are struggling right now. You've seen an increase in incidents in our schools in terms of public safety, and students acting out. I think part of that has to do with some of the mental health struggles that they're facing. And so, it's something that I, 3 years ago, before I left Councilmember Hucker's office, we worked on a supplemental appropriation to hire more mental health workers and mental health counselors for our schools. And it took 2 years to get that passed because, unfortunately, the executive branch and, parts of the MCPS administration were not opposed, but they had concerns. And so it took a couple years to get it passed. It finally got passed last year. So there's supposed to be 50 new mental health workers and social workers in our schools. And only, I think, something like 7 have been hired. So we're really far behind on meeting our children's needs, not just from an education standpoint, but from a mental health standpoint, from a crisis standpoint. And these are all things that affect their education. So,
according to the chart that you show as the very first slide, it's almost 47% what the county spends on funding public education in Montgomery County.
Yeah, and that's just MCPS.
Right, that's MCPS, and that we're still behind other jurisdictions like DC in terms of the amount of money that we allocate per child for education and infrastructure.
Yeah, and I'll say part of that is, we are a little bit different than DC in that we share a lot of our revenue with the state, DC, as its own city form of government. They collect a higher percentage of their income tax and property taxes. And so their budget is a lot bigger than ours. I mean, DC has been funding, all day pre-K for all, children under five and under, for I want to say maybe a decade or longer now. And that's something that, we just haven't been able to figure out how to fund. But I hear you. I mean, we part of the, state's Kerwin Commission report, the blueprint for, education and 21st century education in the county, or rather the state calls for greater allocation of resources from both the county and the state for those investments in education, both on a per pupil basis and on an aggregate basis as well. So it means more funding for teachers to increase teacher pay. That's another issue. Teachers are burnt out. A lot of them are leaving the profession, and so we need to be able to retain and attract the best teachers that are out there. So we can really do that by increasing teacher pay.
Good. Well, you've shown us a great understanding of the various problems in Montgomery County as well as in District 5, which is where the area that you hope to represent. So, and we've been here for almost an hour now. So one more question before I open the floor for questions from participants. Brian, what would you say to those who are still not sure to vote for you? Why vote for Brian Anleu?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my value proposition when I'm at the doors, when I'm talking to voters, is two things. One, I've been doing this work for a long time. I've dedicated my career to public service, to local government. I didn't go work on the Hill. I'm not a political activist, if you will. I'm a local guy. I'm a civic guy, civic organizer who just cares about his community and who's been doing the work here, trying to improve my community one day at a time. So I think what sets me apart from other candidates is that I have the both personal and professional experience to deliver for this county and this district on day one. More so than some of the other candidates in my race. But beyond that, I think what I've demonstrated today is that I have the policy experience and understanding on how things work, and I'm really ready to roll up my sleeves. I'm, work out there knocking on doors every single day, talking to as many voters as I can, to share my, vision and my background. And I think ultimately you're not going to find someone that works harder than me, except maybe Scott Goldberg.
Fantastic. Brian, thank you. And then see if maybe Scott has a question for you.
I mean, that's incredibly dangerous. What's your favorite color?
It's blue, as you can see from my logo.
That's very on brand. What's the weirdest thing that you've experienced about this whole process?
That's a good one. I mean, there've been lots of weird things, from funny, interesting interactions at the doors with voters. People just, I think, surprise you. Some people, want to chat. Actually, I had a guy, because it's a Democratic primary, so you're out talking to Democrats. I had a guy, I knock on his door, and he says he's a Democrat, and he goes, "No, I'm not a Democrat. I just registered as a Democrat because I wanted to vote for the wrong guy, so that in the general, he'd be weaker against my guy." And I was like, okay, I mean, that's interesting. I get that, but I hope you'll vote for me, and so, that's been interesting. I think the whole process has been a challenge. It's, it's not quite like anything I've ever done before. And I'll say this, if you want to know who your friends are, run for public office. You'll learn very quickly. I'm sure Scott can relate.
And so what's been the most rewarding thing that you have experienced?
The most rewarding, I'd say, is getting to know my community in ways that I didn't previously. Even for someone who grew up here and has lived here for over 30 years, I'm still surprised by how much I don't know, and how much I continuously learn about my community. I mean, just an example of that, I was out knocking on doors in the Fairland community, and I came across this this historical marker. It was a home that was owned by a woman who was formerly enslaved. She bought it from her owners, actually, and it became a family homestead. And it was just a base. All that was left of this home was just the base. And you would never know that it was back there. In fact, it was discovered because the ICC was built in 2009 or whatever it was. It was discovered by surveyors. And so I think what's been most rewarding to me is learning things like that I had no idea about in the community, and meeting people who have such rich experiences and have lived here for a long time, and have their own views on what the community should look like and what the county should be doing. And so I think that's probably been the most rewarding. But I'm enjoying it, the good and the bad. And I'm glad I did this, and I'm looking forward to July 19th. That's the date.
Wonderful. Have you met your contestants?
Oh yeah, I've spent a lot of time with them in forums and in other venues and events, and they're all good people, but I want to win. So it's one of those things that sometimes with candidates, everyone wants to be friendly, and I come from it more from I boxed and wrestled growing up, so I'm very competitive, and there can only be one winner, right? So I got to go out and draw distinctions, and maybe not be as friendly as I otherwise would be.
How do you see endorsements in this campaign?
Yeah, well, it's still fairly early in the process, so a lot of the big endorsements haven't come out yet. A few have. Many of the endorsements have gone to one or two of my opponents. And that's all well and good. I'm still expecting some big endorsements here in the next month or so. I think I've been competitive for every endorsement. I've been told I was a finalist for even some of the ones that I missed out on. Here's what endorsements get you. One is they add credibility because organizations are willing to be with you. And then two, they also sometimes help with fundraising if you know what you're doing and you know how to leverage those endorsements to fundraise. I've been fortunate that I've raised a decent amount without any major endorsements, so I think I'll be in an even stronger position when my endorsements come in. But we'll see. It's there's still more than 90 days till election day. So there's still plenty of time, plenty of, endorsements to come out that are, could potentially shake this up. Ultimately, I think what matters most is having those one-on-one conversations with voters, being in front of them every single day, talking to them, and coming back and doing it again. So endorsements are great, but it's being able to use those endorsements to get your message across that really matters most.
Brian, I would like to thank you for your time, your thorough presentation, and all your insights on Montgomery County and District 5. We hope everything will go well for you. We wish you the best. And we also hope to have you back with us soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And if you liked what I had to say, or you want to learn more about me or my campaign and my vision and my priorities, please visit brianforcouncil.com. I think you can see it there on your screen. And if you're so inclined, please consider supporting my campaign. And I appreciate you all and your time.